Welcome back. Okay, what we're going to do in this mini video is continue to review the female hormonal cycle because that will lead us right into the topic for today, which is development and pregnancy. So hopefully you just enjoyed playing the game Name That Hormone, and hopefully it was helpful. And hopefully you have also filled out or attempted to fill out this whatever chart in your lecture guide. And as you should know by now, I love on tests to ask compare and contrast questions. So a question I could ask would be to compare or contrast the effect of FSH in the human male and in the human female. Well, what you should know by now is that FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. It's named for its function in the females. But did you remember its function in the males? Hopefully you remember that FSH stimulates the testes to produce sperm. In females, follicle stimulating hormones does two things. It stimulates the follicle cells to mitose, and it also stimulates the follicle cells to produce estrogen, which helps mature the ovum. So here you go, a comparison in males and females. FSH both stimulate gamete production. Stimulates gamete production in both. You know what I meant. All right, what about LH? Is there a comparison between LH in females and males? I'm sure by now, I hope by now you know that the LH surge is associated with ovulation in females. But do you remember what it does in males? The little mnemonic is L and L. That LH stimulates the Leydig cells in the male to produce the male sex hormone, which is testosterone. Likewise, LH triggers ovulation in females, and this obviously allows the corpus luteum to form, which hopefully you know secretes progesterone. Now, hopefully you know by now that both progesterone and testosterone are steroid hormones. Specifically, they're anabolic steroid hormones. And if you would look at the chemical structure of progesterone and testosterone, they are very, very similar. So there you have a comparison of the effects of LH in the female. LH causes the corpus luteum to form, which produces progesterone in a human female, and other mammals too, not just humans. And LH stimulates the Leydig cells, which produces the analogous hormone in male, testosterone. So let's do a little bit more review. All right, what are all the effects of estrogen on the female's body? Well, first of all, when is estrogen dominant? Remember, with the female hormonal cycle, we have her cycle divided up into two phases. And estrogen is dominant, hopefully you remember, during the follicular phase. And that's a great name for that part of the cycle because it's dominated by the presence of that follicle getting bigger and bigger and bigger until you have the ripe ovum. All right, as the estrogen circulates throughout the female's body, this should be review, it promotes the development of the secondary sex characteristics, breast development, another layer of fat underneath the skin. Also, as it circulates throughout the woman's body, it causes the endometrium to thicken, the inner lining of the uterus. Okay, more review. When the estrogen is at its peak level, hopefully you know by now that that is the signal that we have a ripe ovum, because that peak level of estrogen is secreted by that huge follicle. And as that follicle has been growing, it's been secreting estrogen, which is maturing the egg. So when you have this huge follicle, it is simultaneously secreting this peak level of estrogen into the woman's bloodstream, and it is a signal that we have a ripe one. We have a winner to egg of the month. This peak level of estrogen has two key effects on the body, at least two key effects. First, it exerts negative feedback on what? If you're thinking hypothalamus, that's a good thing. So why do we want, is that negative feedback on the hypothalamus so important? Because we have our gold winner. The one ovum has crossed the finish line. It's ripe. It's ready to burst out. We don't want a silver and bronze winner. We don't want the second and third place ova to be ovulated. We only want one baby. All right, so this peak level of estrogen is simultaneously exerts negative feedback on the hypothalamus and positive feedback on the, drumroll, anterior pituitary, which hopefully you know by now triggers that LH surge and pops out that one ripe ovum. All right, it's really neat how all this is synchronized together hormonally. The same peak level of estrogen causes the cervix, the bottom of the woman's uterus, to secrete this very, very fluid cervical mucus, which is sperm friendly. So normally, vagina is very inhospitable to sperm. It's the acidity causes 25% of them to die right off the bat, while this cervical mucus protects them and guides them up into her reproductive tract. I get asked, well, what do you mean by cervical mucus? I can look at a biology book and tell whether it's written by a male or a female, because women, fertile women, cycling women, just in their normal everyday toileting routines, they'll notice that their bodies sometimes make this mucus. And sometimes it's sort of tacky, but sometimes it's very slippery and slimy. And that is this very fertile cervical mucus, because this cervical mucus only occurs at this peak level of estrogen, and this only happens right before ovulation. All right, if an egg is going to be fertilized, the sperm have to enter the female's body before the egg actually pops out. After it pops out, it's too late. That egg's going to die within 24 to 36 hours. I was once hiking through the woods in the Rocky Mountains with some other biologists, and they were males, and one was an expert on human evolution. And I don't know how we got talking about the topic, but he said, what, do you mean that a woman could mate with a man and she would know she's fertile and he wouldn't, and she could mate with another man and he wouldn't know that she's not fertile? So she could basically control who the father of her child is? I said, yep. He said, wow, I'm going to rewrite a whole chapter in human evolution. All right, moving right along. Progesterone is dominant when? Hopefully you're thinking during the luteal phase, the second half of the woman's cycle, dominated by the presence of the corpus luteum. So progesterone, as it circulates throughout the female's body, also promotes the development of her secondary sex characteristics. It really, really, really thickens the endometrium. And because the corpus luteum is large when it forms, the levels of progesterone are already at high levels, and it continues to exert negative feedback on the hypothalamus. This is important because we just popped out one egg. We don't want to mature another egg until we see if this one's going to be fertilized or not. All right, so like I said, the high levels of progesterone continue to exert negative feedback on the hypothalamus. One effect I've not talked about yet is it thickens the cervical mucus. A plug forms. Why? Well, again, once that progesterone level rises, that egg has been ovulated. So sperm coming in, if they want to try to fertilize an egg, so to speak, it's too late. The door is shut. All right. If the woman does get pregnant, that cervical mucus will really thicken under the continued influences of progesterone, and it forms what's called a cervical plug. And that's one of the first stages of labor, or signs of labor, is when the woman loses that cervical plug. Not all women notice it. But why would she even form this? Well, think about it. It's protection, because it would protects her reproductive tract and any developing fetus from microbial infection. All right, another effect of progesterone, it raises a woman's basal body temperature. So that's her temperature first upon waking in the morning. And we'll talk about the importance of that later. And again, this is because progesterone, like testosterone, is an anabolic steroid. So this was a review. Now, if you can put all this information together and really, really understand it, you should be able to answer this Dr. House question. What would be a good ingredient for a fertility pill? Now, this is an important question because 1 out of every 8 couples in the United States have fertility problems, have trouble getting pregnant. So it could be the guy's fault, but let's assume, because we're on the female hormonal cycle, that it's sort of the woman's fault. So the best way to answer this question is to think what could be the problem, and then that with the woman's body, and then how could you fix that problem using something that could be given to her in a pill. So think about what would be the problem, what would be a good ingredient for a fertility pill. Send it to me in an email or the Google sheet of, labeled Dr. House problem number 1. And then you should also be able to answer this question too. You probably already know this. What is the common side effect of the fertility pill or fertility treatments, and why do you think this is? And I will see you later.